All right, I'm going to call the Broadband Authority special meeting for Monday, April 11th to order. We could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moment of silence. Thank you. All right, first is the adoption of the agenda. Entertain a motion.
Make a motion.
Mr. Carney,
I'll second.
Mr. Whitson, any discussion?
We do have public, yeah, we've got public comment. We're good. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. All right, now we do go into public comment. This evening, if you can, if anybody wishes to speak, keep the time limit to 5 minutes or less when you come up to address the authority. If you will please give your name. I'm not sure district matters in this group, but we'd like to know where you're from. And we'll give you the 5 minutes to speak to us about anything that's on your mind. Okay. All right.
Several on Zoom.
Yes, see several on Zoom. Anyone wishing to speak, if you'll please raise your Zoom hand and Mr. Curry will unmute you. It's for public comment. Anyone on Zoom? I don't see anybody using it. No. Not seeing any hands raised. Thank you very much. I will close public comment. And we'll go into the regular agenda item, which is the Northern Shenandoah Valley Regional Commission All Points Broadband Partnership. Basically, this meeting was called to discuss the documents that we now have, to talk through them and make sure that everybody has an opportunity to see them before our regular meeting on Monday.
How do you want to proceed?
Anybody can really start. Ms. Pandek is on the call. Should there be questions that she can help with?
Would it be helpful if either Ms. Pandek or Mr. Curry kind of frame for us what documents we have in front of you, and what actions might be required thereof?
Makes good sense.
I can do that. Maybe if I talk in this direction, it'll work. I think everybody can hear it. It was brought to my attention right before the meeting that I attached two of the same document and not the fiscal agent agreement that was previously provided to the authority board a couple of weeks ago. I remedied that just before the meeting. The fiscal agent agreement does have some changes. They're not many. So I just want to point that out right off the top. There are 3 documents that have been proposed by the Northern Shenandoah Regional Commission. One of those is not at all complete. That is an agreement between DHCD, the state, and the regional commission. That is in a form prescribed by the state. They shared a template. You can see that template is listed in the BoardDocs twice.
Is that attached twice?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay.
That's my.
They're not 2 separate documents.
No.
Okay.
So that template will have several exhibits attached, which are important. And the most important is a milestones document that will identify what work is going to be completed and by when. So there's not a lot we can dig into that template this time. And my understanding is that that document has been vetted by the Attorney General's office And it probably would be difficult to change that document. That's set template across the state for the $750 million of body that they approved in the last cycle. It requires an agreement between the grantee, which is Northern Shenandoah Regional Commission, whatever letters they are, and the ISP, which in this case is All Points Broadband. There's no contemplation that a different agreement would be needed between the grantee and the counties. The way it is set up, though, Northern Shenandoah Valley Regional Commission has put forward an agreement between them and All Points Broadband, and then a separate agreement between them and the 8 counties. And I sent a memo to the board late this afternoon with my preliminary review of all 3 of these documents, really just the latter 2, because the template is what it is. And I said, and I've said to the board before, it was my desire for the regional commission, the counties, and All Points to all be in the same agreement, so that the counties had direct reach to the ISP during construction and after construction. The regional commission and our peer counties have not accepted that recommendation. So you have before you what is coming out of the regional commission in those counties so far. And those counties are each going through a similar process that you're going through right now in reviewing the documents to determine whether they adequately guide the project and manage everybody's risks. The meat of the agreement really is then in the agreement between the regional commission and All Points Broadband. And that has been attached. And it's called the VADI 2022 Grant Administration Agreement 4.6 Rev 2. In essence, it says that regional commission is going to manage the grant, and All Points is going to implement the system as provided for in the grant application. There are a few areas that the agreement provides more detail than what was in the grant agreement with respect to the $59.99 monthly fee that was going to be fixed by inflation, the $199 connection fee that was available during the first 12 months, and a few other areas that it adds additional specificity. And we can go through each of those documents if you would like to. I believe that additional specificity is needed in a few areas, particularly related to the consumer price index inflator and how specifically it would be applied. There's a lot of, you can't just say CPI, it's a lot more detailed than that. And relative to that CPI, the agreement states that the baseline date is December 2021. Of course, that's already happened. And so the inflator is already in place and you haven't even signed an agreement. And the first house isn't going to be connected for who knows how long.
2 to 3 years.
I strongly believe that it should be extended. It should go into play when the first service is available. All Points said on a phone that, oh yeah, that's what they mean. If that's the case, then put it in writing. Regarding the $199 fee for connection, there are a lot of questions left that weren't in the application that I saw that aren't in the agreement. They've pretty well cleared up that it's $199 for the first 12 months, no matter how long your service drop is, 12 months from the date it's available at that location. But what it doesn't say is what happens after the 12 months. Is it still $199 for a short distance? Is that short distance 500 feet, 1,000 feet, 20 feet? And what happens after that 500 feet? Mm-hmm. Is it $5 a foot, $1 a foot? Is it $1 a foot indexed for inflation? Is it site specific? And I think those things ought to be in this agreement.
Well, he told those Clark County and Fauquier something along those lines that after the $199, it would be $199 plus like $1.25.
A typical formula, but I don't see it in the application, right, and I don't see it in the agreement. And so if that's their intent, we just simply have to get those into the document.
In terms of prioritization, and thanks a lot for
doing the review that you did so quickly. So there's obviously the template for the contract between the state and the regional commission, and your position there is really, it's a template. So there's not much we can say right now. The second is really the media agreement, which is a 23-page document between the regional commission, All Points Broadband, and then the third is a fiscal agent agreement. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought we already gave the go ahead on the fiscal agent agreement.
You gave what the board authorized was the declaration regarding the Chantel Hardolph area. You have seen the fiscal agent agreement for a couple weeks now, maybe longer. I can't remember the exact date. Okay. And there is some track changes in the version that's attached that show a couple paragraphs that were added that try to answer some of the concerns. The biggest issue that I have pointed out in the fiscal agent agreement, let me back up. The agreement between the regional commission and All Points basically states that the regional commission has to do all the things they've committed to do in the fiscal agent agreement, and all the things they've committed to DHCD to do in the overall agreement. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. The agreement between the regional commission and the county says that they're going to do all the things, and I'm paraphrasing, and the language might need to be cleaned up. They're going to do all the things they have to do in accordance to the DHCD agreement. But it doesn't say they're going to do all the things they said they have to do in accordance with the All Points agreement. And I made that point on the conference call on Friday, say, well, wait a minute. I mean, the counties are going to provide $62.5 million in exchange for something, and that something ought to be do what you said you're going to do in the DHCD agreement and do what you said you're going to do in the All Points agreement. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, the counties have no access to the $59.99 rate or the $199 connection fee or some of these other things. If something doesn't go right, we're stuck with the regional commission being the only party that has a legally binding agreement with All Points, and that's fine so long as we can compel the regional commission to do things in accordance to our contract. At least that's how I, non-lawyer, see things.
Yeah, that's well said.
And that I put in uppercase, I think, bold letters. And if there's one thing that we can get out of the fiscal agent agreement, I think that is it. Now, I prefaced everything to say, and I started this conversation, that I've been working my hardest back channels with my peers in other counties. And of course, this body requested Ms. Pandek to work her peers in the county attorney seats across the counties to try to affect change. And we've been unable to really do that. And to this point now, things could change between now and whenever these documents get adopted. I'm not sure why that is. I think these counties just want to get it done, and if everything goes well, this will work out just fine. But normally agreements are in place when everything doesn't go well. Mm-hmm. That's why you have terms and conditions to sort that out. So it's not what I would have hoped we would have ended up with. But if we can get some changes, and the nature of my review basically states that, in as much as it doesn't appear that we can influence wholesale changes, we should, within the framework that we've received, we should continue to push for targeted changes to best protect our citizens. Mm-hmm. The other foundation in that review is that this is not a typical procurement. The regional commission, and the county, and the state aren't buying anything. We're supporting a private entity in their economic development endeavor, essentially. Mm. At the end of the project, we don't end up with widgets. We don't end up with fiber. We don't end up with a system. We end the project with exactly what we started, except for money. And the private entity, that could not happen capitalistically without this grant infusion, is going to have a system. And so that private entity has motivators to install the products in a proper way so they end up with a viable product, and deliver a service in a way that they can get customers, because without customers, they have no revenue to recoup all this capital they're investing. And that apparently is the entirety of your protection in the future for the service that's being provided, is their profit motive is aligned with your interest that your citizens will have a system that works. Now, before the DHCD will fully pay, they're going to have to prove that a certain percentage meet the speed requirements, and DHCD is positioned in the agreement to review all payments and determine whether payments are appropriate or not. And only after DHCD approves the payments are appropriate, and only after DHCD sends the money for that portion would the regional commission actually tap each county's funds.
So that's a really important point. Do we have, maybe it's too early to know, but do we know from a practical perspective how DHCD is actually going to conduct that type of field audit?
I don't have anything from them, but we said earlier there's $750 some odd million of funding. I don't believe they have the staff to do anything other than a paper review. I don't know that to be true. The regional commission is empowered in the grant agreement to inspect, do anything they want, them, their consultants, contractors. And so the 8 counties could coalesce and join with each other and invest in whatever sort of third-party inspection company you wanted to. Of course, this body has access to some funds that you could cost share with 7 other companies and probably develop a pretty good sized pool to do that. But that might require regional collaboration and group thought that that's the right thing to do. Maybe sub-regions could do that, but it would have to be through the regional commission, who's empowered by the grant agreement to do that. The county is not a party to the agreement, and specifically, the agreement makes it very clear that there's no third party that is, you get the wording, but no third party is a party to the agreement. And so your access is solely through the regional commission.
Yeah, I've talked to Ms. Donahue just in passing about the idea that the topography of our county, and maybe everyone's unique, everyone thinks they're more unique than the next locality, but I think we're pretty unique. And I just as part of this is more on the back end than on the contractual review, but just thinking ahead, so many citizens say, am I going to get it? And then we've defaulted to this basic rule that if you don't have Xfinity, then most likely you fall into that unserved, underserved category. But then follows the question, how do we protect against, a call from somebody down in some lane off of some road that says, hey, no one ever came here. How do we make sure that we're covering everyone? And I feel like our topography is challenging, our population is small enough that we should do whatever's needed to protect our own interests in this regard.
Yeah, and
some kind of field audit.
The application does include an whole outreach process by all points, an iterative process where there's going to be mailers and door hangers and all sorts of things. But then what about the person who's 2 miles down behind a gate that comes here 4 months out of the year? And how do we make sure? And I think there does it makes sense. And this body authorized Ms. Donahue to start working up a mailer. I think you probably should do all of the above approach, but it should be coordinated with all points, because you don't want to send out competing messages.
Right.
And as I noted, you have some funds, so you could do things to help with that. Now, again, one could argue that All Points wants as many connections as possible, and I believe they'll have access to state funds for long line extensions that are in the works. Without that, one could also argue that, if they missed a couple really long lines, it wouldn't hurt their bottom line at all. So we do need to keep them honest in that regard.
But the problem is, whether you do mailers or not, for now, at April 11th, whether Shenandoah is going to want all those 8 counties to sign on before they sign their May 4th or 5th deadline with All Points, or with all of that. we don't have time to do a mailer and get responses and tabulate that and see who's where.
No, I think that would be a function of over the 3-year period.
I know, but so we've got to commit to something and we don't know what that is.
And more importantly, not even over the 3-year period. I think that Rappahannock County has a leg up on most of the other counties because REC has run a bunch of their middle mile fiber in the county already, whereas Dominion and SVEC hasn't started.
That's interesting.
Now, REC hasn't run from the Flint Hill substation north and I guess out Crest Hill, but the rest is done. So there's nothing stopping or inhibiting all points from getting rolling in our county, which means that's great, early connections. It also means the 12-month clock starts when broadband is available at a particular location. So when they build this network, it's fiber to a particular node, and then there's a number of addresses that would be served by that fiber node. So once that node's in place, they're going to start notifying those people and access. That's when the word really needs to get out to the community that your 12 months is starting today. And it's going to be this staggered 12-month process all across the whole 8 counties. That's going to be tough for messaging.
Basically by neighborhood or by hollow or by.
Right.
Yep.
Part of hollow.
Yeah.
But again, it's based on this case scenario.
Well, and we don't, yeah, but there could be somebody else who's, 28, 30 months away before the node gets to them.
Well, I was looking at the agreement with Northern Shenandoah Valley, and I looked at the one with all points in Northern Shenandoah Valley. And it talks about the building the system as identified in the original body application. Now, when I look at that application, it shows a map of the entire Rappahannock County except right along the main corridors as green. And then there's another map that's green except for the entire southern part of the county that calls out the RDOF. I don't believe the RDOF area is in the original application.
The RDOF area was in the original application and it was not in the award. However, that map you point out with the white paths along where Comcast is, that's not precise.
Gary, could you just say what the folks here don't know what the acronym are?
Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. Shentel participated in a federal program to seek funding and were tentatively awarded a portion of Piedmont and Stonewall Hawthorne District to put wireless internet in. Shentel no longer is interested in deploying wireless internet, and they're seeking an exit from the federal program. The state has since said they will provide funding for fiber to the home in that area.
What do we have from all points that says that they will provide fiber to the home in that area?
I believe it is in the original grant, but
It says it excludes the RDOF area.
I think it points out the RF area, but you make a valid point. It would be easy enough to make sure the agreements are clear that the area being served in the 4 counties includes.
The comments and questions I made the last time that we met together at the joint meeting. There's no possible way financially that he can do the RDOF areas for the $2 million, even if you multiply that by 3 times, let's say his money, body money, county money, et cetera. There's no way that those RDOF areas can be built out for that amount of money that was held back.
Yeah, I would suggest that was based on an artful approach to valuing the portion to be removed to be as small as possible so that when the state did fund the $300 million project, it was as high as possible if they pulled that RDOF. The whole was developed before the award came down and said, we need you to value the part without RDOF. And so I think my impression is that they pushed the state to make that as low as possible.
Yeah.
Ms. Pandak has her hand up. And
Yeah.
sorry, I just noticed that. Go ahead, Ms. Pandak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would mention one thing with respect to the definition or the description of the locational area. When I spoke with counsel for the commission, As Mr. Curry's indicated, they don't appear willing to make any changes, but he did say that he thought the locations were clear. And if the locations are not abundantly clear, and I think the point on the RDUF area is well taken, then we may well get them to make sure that they define those locations for us. So I think that is where we might make some material progress in an attachment, if nothing else.
These are the same comments I've been making for 7, 8 months now, but that's the problem. We're right here with 3 weeks left, and they're the same questions that have gone unanswered for 8 months.
I think a lot of people that I know too that have Comcast are under the impression that if they have a long drop, that they're considered unserved and can get the $199 long drop, even if they would normally have a Comcast installation. Is that correct? Because I don't see that really covered either.
And so I did list in my memorandum that I do think there could be more specificity as to the locations that are included. And there's specific verbiage in the agreement that said location specified in the application. Well, in the application, there's a map. So our location's a map, our map of locations, and that map is not very precise. We know that. Yet we were told when we were sold the project that it was universal broadband coverage. And that's what they told the state. That's what they told us. We're going to provide universal coverage. And that's why the state wants to check off entire counties, right? And so I believe there should be more specificity on that universal. Specifically regarding your question, we were told over and over again that if there's a special construction charge from Comcast, which means if you go call Comcast and say, I want cable to my house, and they say, sure, our regular installation cost is $200, but for you, it's going to be $400 because you're further away, you are supposedly eligible for the All Points program. Be awfully nice if the agreement said those things.
Right.
My neighbors is over 4,000.
Yeah. Right, and then we've heard stories of 50,000 and
Go out, the individual Don Locke that's right off Newtown Road, he was quoted in excess of 25,000.
right.
A lady on Rollins Ford Road was quoted $83,000.
Are they included in the polygon that was in the map?
Well, I
And now-
don't know. I mean, it's
We don't know. And the grant agreement application also included uploaded shape files in GIS format. We don't have the means to really review those. Do those include the detail that we are seeking? And maybe that's the answer to some of the questions. I don't know. But the graphical maps seem to lack precision, specifically with respect to the claim that it's universal coverage. If you don't have wired 25.3 today without a special construction charge, you're included. And I think I noted in my memorandum, it'd be awfully nice if the agreement said that.
Yeah. Right, and they were, I mean, part of the imprecision, I noticed like where I live, they were assuming, and maybe it was because of what CenturyLink told them, but they were assuming that we had some kind of CenturyLink service all the way back in Arizona, which obviously we don't. It ends, you know, like
right.
2 miles from town.
You're in the polygon, but there weren't green dots.
Correct.
You know, but I did ask specifically about your address because I knew, and they looked you up and saw, yeah, you're in the database. So I think that was a mapping issue.
Yeah, and it might come down to this GIS polygon. So we don't have ArcView or anything.
We have access, and so I suppose that's something tacit I could take with our GIS consultant to say, hey, what is it?
Yeah, I mean, if there's going to be underlying data files that we need to review that we haven't seen yet, and it's going to require some kind of basic off-the-shelf GIS software like ArcView or ArcInfo, we should have someone reviewing that instead of assuming that we don't have the data.
I would prefer they just say universal coverage, and if you don't have wire 25.3 without a special construction charge, then you're covered. To heck with a map, I want everybody.
Right, because on the front end, they're not even going to be able to, I mean, if they make that commitment, then we can ostensibly assist them in making sure all.
It's pretty easy in Rappahannock County. There's only one company who provides wire 25.3. Now, some of these other counties, there might be 3 or 4, and it might get confusing of what wire 25.3 overlaps and what is the white space and what is the covered space. Here, it's not so confusing. So I can understand how they don't want to confuse the matter in writing.
Yeah.
But is it universal coverage or is it not universal coverage? What did we buy?
Don't worry, Will. Don't worry.
Now, we were told that connections to areas in the white area who are served by Comcast can't be installed or funded by the VATI grant. When the VATI grant is done, those other areas are the most profitable areas in the county to provide service. All Points has a profit motive to then, after the project, serve those areas too, because they can get a number of connections in a small area. They just can't use the grant money for it. So when the project's over, then I suspect they'll be pushing into those more dense areas.
Yeah.
It's the fringe areas that we want to make sure
Yeah.
are covered that might have long service drop distances that should be covered by the grant and the state, federal, local dollars. Then later on the profit motive of, I'm going to pick up as many others as I can. Although I'll probably be left out because they put the fiber on the other side of the 211 from my house. So
right.
it'll be very expensive for them to run over and just pick up my house. So I'll probably never get it. So Comcast it is. If everybody gets off Comcast, that shared usage, my bandwidth will go up.
So, I don't know if this is a question for Ms. Pandak or for you, Gary. So the fiscal agent agreement, you made some really valid comments in your memorandum. Is that where are we on that? And I'm sorry that I did not remember correctly. I thought we had dispensed with it, but what's the timeline for us to sign off on that?
It's all looped together.
It is.
So
Okay.
the state DHCD wants, well, I think we all want agreements to be adopted as soon as possible so we can get on with this, but not so soon as you don't have the necessary protections in place.
Okay.
The three agreements really need to be done in tandem in one way or another. And for example, the agreement between All Points and the regional commission says that one of the last provisions says it's null and void if the other ones aren't done.
Okay.
Right. So they all kind of have to be done. The state deadline is May 5th. I think the state is willing to extend, but we all have pressure to move it on. And All Points has pressure because they've got supplier contracts in place.
So from a practical perspective, Mr. Brazier raises a good question about the RDOF area. And then I think we've had a good discussion about a higher level of specificity to define who's getting it and what we should expect in terms of what universal coverage means. It's separate from that. It sounds like Ms. Pandek's not, I mean, she's made the effort to find out what other attorneys involved are thinking.
And she's got her hand up.
Yeah, I'm just curious how we now proceed on those fronts.
Well, and Ms. Pandek has something to say. I would say, as I said earlier, we want to influence as much as we can, but process heretofore has indicated that we have been unable to influence large changes.
Yeah.
Ms. Pandak?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Mr. Curry is correct. I believe going forward, the board would be too optimistic to believe that we are going to get many, if any, changes to these documents. They are on a very fast track, both because of the perceived state schedule right now, also because the commission wants to keep to that schedule, and because in order to meet that schedule, Fauquier County needs to take action next week. Once Fauquier County takes action on the documents, well, they likely will have some small ability to for their county administrator to accept changes from other localities. My guess is it will be a very small ability. And so what Fauquier County adopts, should they go first, is going to set the pace for the rest of the localities.
And Fauquier County does have an RDOF area, if I remember correctly.
Yes,
So, I don't
they
know.
would be like-minded to ensure if there's any ambiguity.
Sure.
Right, so they're going first. It seems like maybe we can talk to their county administrator or someone over there and just make sure that they're thinking the way our colleague, Mr. Frazier, is in this regard.
Or they can point out to us in one of the agreements or the application that it very explicitly says that those areas are included. Either would suffice, but one or the other should be in play.
Why haven't we found that?
I can't say whether I read it and forgot it, or it might be there, but it might not, and it's something, if it's not in there, it's easy to include it in an agreement.
Another thing though, I don't know if I'm interrupting anybody, I hope not, but way on back, I think it was the August meeting that we met with Mr. Carr, and I asked him about a performance bond, and he said that he would sign a performance bond, but that would be with Northern Shenandoah, and it's not in their document.
It isn't now. The application does include funding for bonds between All Points and their contractors, but we're not necessarily a party to that. And so you have to ask yourself whether that's acceptable or not. And I think that was valued at 1.5% of the whole contract. And to know that should All Points contractors fail, they have a mechanism in place to bring a bonding company in to bring it to fruition. That's valuable. And they say they're going to do what the application says, and that's in the application. It's in the funding tables in the back of the application. So that is in place, but there, as you point out, there is no performance bond identified in the agreements that are before you. And in as much as we're not purchasing anything, I don't think it's a state requirement to have a performance bond, because it's not a procurement of goods or services.
It is a performance bond. I mean, it is a purchase of services
Well, it's an investment in a private company
to
to,
deliver a service. It
Ms.
may be a
Pandek.
gray area.
yeah, Ms. Pandek, it is a gray area, Ms. Pandek has her hand up.
Madam Chair, there's no requirement for a performance bond that appears in these documents, and I don't believe it should be treated as if it were a procurement. What I believe you would hear the commission or DHCD say is that because All Points only gets paid when they demonstrate they have met the intervals in the application for performing work, that is used in lieu of a performance bond. I would be surprised. I'd be stunned if the state were willing to require All Points for anything equivalent to the cost of this project as a performance bond.
There is I believe a 10% retainage.
Yes.
When All Points bills the regional commission, who sends it to the state will pull 10% off the side before they do a reimbursement. So that 10% kind of trickles down to our match. And so both of us essentially have a retainage on the side that would only be released at the end of the project.
This shows, I mean, this is just mind-boggling. If I was a roofing contractor and was gonna put a roof on this building here for $100,000, I would have to have a performance bond with the county.
I think the value's gone up now, but you have good point.
Well, whatever that number is, it's less than $1 million, and here we're gonna spend 5.9 million. Plus the state is giving us like 6.9 million or whatever it is. So I think the numbers are like $13 million. And each county is gonna be coming up with a total of whatever it is to make $62 million. The state's kicking in 97 million. I mean, this is just mind-boggling that this kind of money is being dealt with, and there's no performance bond out there that requires anybody to complete anything.
Well, there will, according to the application, there's a bond for the contractors to All Points. And I would say, as I noted in my memo, I view this more akin to public-private economic development program, where typically what you would see is there's an investment of public funds, and in exchange, you're going to create X number of jobs in the future. And if you don't create X number of jobs in the future, then we're going to take our money back. The way this document says, we're going to give you public funds and you're going to provide this service to our citizens. And if you don't do that, you have to pay us back. It's not super clear on what sort of things would trigger that, and it would trigger the payback, the repayment. It's in the agreement, but it would be controlled by DHCD, and the Office of Attorney General would be the counsel in such an arrangement. That is valuable. That I wouldn't want to have to go up against the Attorney General's office, and I hope we don't ever get there.
I hope not either, but I do know in Virginia courts that if it's not written down, it didn't happen. There's a lot in here that isn't written down.
And the application certainly has many generalities and vagaries, that's the right word, that we would want specified in certain situations, if we can, in one of the two agreements or three agreements.
So this was what they called, or Jimmy Carr called, a whole jurisdiction solution.
Whole jurisdiction approach, that's right.
And I guess what we're really looking at is, do we have that assurance?
Absolutely.
It's very simple. It's, there's all kinds of things that could go on and blah, blah, blah. But that's how it was sold.
Absolutely. And I suspect each one of the counties it was sold as, because the state said, we are giving preference to VATI grants that are universal coverage, whole county approach.
So is that something, because that's very clear, it is different than universal, but that's what they said. Is there any way to get that?
To define it.
Yeah, to get that from them? Is there any way? I don't know if that's something that DHCD is saying, yes, we agree with that. If that doesn't happen, that's totally unacceptable. The reason that we're doing this is because of, X, Y, and Z. This is how this was sold. I mean, that's what the state is trying to do. It's not patchwork.
Sure. Well, I mean, certainly there are a lot of easy ways to ask. And it's harder to guarantee a change in an agreement, and it's complicated. I would say I have, and to a lesser point, Ms. Pandek has worn our welcome to some extent with the other counties and the regional commission, with persistence on trying to effect change in these documents. If we went to the state and said, hey, state, this application says, whole county approach or whatever it says, if it says that, and we want to make sure you enforce that before anything's signed, that would further impact the relation between us and our peers. So it'd be awfully nice if we could get some assurance locally before we ever went through the state.
Just a point of order question. Do we have a secretary for this meeting? I see Ms. Bond is not here.
I noted the votes, and I've got 2 reporters going, so.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that
Thank
she was aware that we were meeting tonight.
I had no idea. It was,
I just happened to check what was sent and I don't see her name on anything.
I don't know.
And if that's the case, my apologies to Ms. Bond, Mr. Anderson.
Mine too.
I guess if I could, Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
board members, authority members, I have a question, I guess, for Ms. Pandek. What at this stage are we able to get done as far as answering these questions that we have lingering for a long time now?
Madam Chair, if I might respond to Mr. Frazier. Let me start with a direct response and then a little broader. With respect to the issue of location, whether it's universal versus whole county versus what area is going to be covered, I think that we can make progress on that by posing perhaps an amendment to one of the agreements and saying, we just need to know this. Can you answer this question for us? And I say that because of the phone conversation I had with counsel for the commission about a week ago. So to go to your other questions, which are in many ways parallel those things that Mr. Curry has indicated to you in his memorandum. Pursuant to the board's direction, I contacted my colleagues. I sent separately to Mr. Bowman, who is counsel for the commission, a whole list of things to consider, including some small language revisions, but a lot of questions that incorporated those concerns Mr. Curry had, as well as mine. And you received an amended fiscal agent agreement that had relatively modest changes to it. I do think that the two whereases that were added are good changes, but they in no way address the concerns we had articulated. I then sent posed questions to Mr. Bowman, which I shared with my colleagues who are counsel for the other localities, to the heart of some of the key issues. And I think where I best understand the commission is that they are comfortable with their current documents. That doesn't mean that there may not be some small changes, but that is the clear understanding that I have. It remains to be seen, since none of the lawyers can speak for their clients until their boards actually start taking up these documents. And that's just happening this week as you were doing it. But I believe, as Mr. Curry articulated at the beginning of his statements, that there is a general sense that the localities do not need to be involved in making major changes to these documents. That because of DHCD's oversight, the reference to involvement of the Attorney General's office, which would be true of any document enforcement by a state agency, ARPA, the commission being involved, I believe that the counties will likely state that they are comfortable with the documents as well. Can't say that until they actually look at them, but I believe that's consistent with what Mr. Curry has been hearing from talking to his colleagues. And so the choice that you have, and Madam Chair, you can interrupt me if I go too far, is yes, Mr. Curry I can do a lot of markup on these documents, or and at the bottom line, maybe create unrealistic expectations for the authority as to what changes might be made to the documents. Or you reach the conclusion, because you are one of 8 and you signed on to apply for the VATI grant as one of 8, that you may not have the ability to influence your colleagues, and that maybe their view of it is a different philosophy, which is it's too big to fail. Or that the checks are there both by DHCD, and we don't think about ARPA much in terms of the power that the federal government might have, but it's lurking out there in the background too, not as to individual people and whether they get connected, but as to the overall project. And that Rappahannock County gets the financial benefit of being part of one of 8, as opposed to trying to go it alone and maybe or maybe not being able to apply for another VATI grant into the future. So I think that's what it's going to boil down to at the point that you're asked to take action on these documents. I made some notes, and I'll confer again with Mr. Curry and send off a few more propose changes to commission council and copy my colleagues. I don't mind doing that. But I think that sending a laundry list is not going to be effective. It is not necessarily going to help as part of what I would call the positive camaraderie of being with your other 8 localities and the commission. Do I think they would get over it? Probably yes, once the project goes forward. But I think that if we can just minimize and highlight the key things as opposed to trying to rework agreements in which it's been made pretty clear they're not reworking the agreements. And they may even want you to approve the fiscal agent agreement. With the grant agreement, I think it will be done, but we don't even know that the VATI agreement will be completely finalized at the point that you're asked to make a decision. Not a perfect world, but I think that's where we are.
I think that's a very interesting encapsulation, and I mean, I'm a little disheartened because it sounds like there's no desire to drill down into details, and yet we're just starting.
Yeah.
That's
Madam Chair, if I might, I think, Ms. Smith, there are 2 philosophies. And so I do not at all mean to indicate that your other colleagues in the counties are in any way not responsibly doing this. I think that their perception of how these documents fit together and the role that they play in them may be different than how Rappahannock wants to drill down through it. So I think they're 2 different philosophies.
I think it boils down to where they're using most of their ARPA funds or all their ARPA funds. So they think it's other people's money, and we're not in that predicament. We have a different predicament, whereas we had to raise money a lot more than the ARPA funds. And I don't know if that's what it is or not, but the thing is, I don't see how anybody can buy anything with public money and not know some more of this information that we're lacking. And again, it's been lacking for months. All these details could have been ironed out before we got to this point, but there was no response from either All Points or Northern Shenandoah. They're out of town, they're on vacation, they're not available. And here we are, pretty much at the wire. They're saying they don't want to change anything. And I think everybody is caught up in this thing, and nobody wants to do anything because they're afraid they'll either slow it down or make somebody mad. For $62.5 million, we don't want to make anybody mad.
I did flip through the VATI application while Ms. Pandek was talking. Question prompt 10 for the ad application was explain how the proposed project achieves universal broadband coverage for the locality or fits into a larger plan to achieve universal broadband coverage for the locality. The answer is achieving universal broadband access has been a long-term objective of each participating county, and this project will achieve that objective in each county. And it goes on to say a lot of other words.
What are you reading?
The application.
Yeah.
But it goes on to talk about 42,693 locations. So, is 42,693 universal, or is it approximately universal? So it'd be nice to be able to say, well, the answer to prompt 10 in the application says this project will provide universal. And we would like some parallel statement in the agreement. And maybe our peers will agree with us that would be a great thing to include, because there are gray areas. I know across the street from me, they're along 211, but they don't have access to Comcast because it's on my side of the road. And so, are they in them? Are they covered? Or are they not covered? And if they put their address into the database thing, what is it going to say? And what are they, what access will they have? I mean, they're right on the fiber line. Does the first sentence of this answer cover the grant? Because it says they're going to do what it says in the application. Or do the following paragraphs that talk about down to the single location, 42,693. And it also does answer your RDOF question, which says, it will provide coverage for those that remain unserved after any wireline provider offering broadband service of at least 25.3 completes its deployment obligations under RDOF or other federal broadband program. The Chantel project was not a wireline 25.3, and so they would not be excluded. So they should be included in the 42,693, but it seems like somebody could definitively answer that for us and put a statement in the agreement.
So on that point, since Faulkner County is going to be, it sounds like reviewing and probably signing between now and our next meeting, is that, and recognizing that maybe board and I are welcome. I mean, you have a good relationship with Faulkner County.
The deputy county administrator there is assigned this, and she and I have spoken a number of different things, and I'd be happy to reach out to her just to point out.
Particular, because at least maybe they can lead the charge there and make sure we cover Mr. Fraser's concerns.
Yeah, it's us, Fauquier, Frederick, and Rockingham.
Okay.
And I do have good connections in Frederick as well.
Mr. Whitson, are my concerns not the board's authority's concerns?
Well, no, but it sounds like absolutely they are, and I'm just trying to think from a practical standpoint. It sounds like despite our efforts and despite our council's effort to talk to people, that we're getting some pushback, that since we know that Faulkner County is going to be talking about this imminently and that they also have an RDOF area, I just thought that would be a useful way to try to affect a change in that regard, since one other locality is going to be potentially signing something before we talk about it again.
Yeah, I think you meant the authority's concerns as expressed by Mr. Fraser, I think is what he meant.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, I read another partial paragraph that referred to the RDOF area, and it said if it was successfully challenged, but they didn't successfully challenge it because Chantel said that they would build it out within 3 years. So it was not successfully challenged as far as Chantel backing out during that process. They're backing out later. So what does that really mean?
Well, and so the discussion with DHCD along the way was, when is RDOF going to be added back into the project? And there was discussion, well, we could enter into an agreement. We could have a subsequent agreement to add it back in later. And everybody said, no, we don't want to do that. That's way complicated. We wanted it in the agreement. And DHCD said they would do that. Now we're waiting for DHCD to fill out this template, and that this template must include information that shows that they're funding the whole thing to include RDOF. And I think that will trickle on down, but it'd be nice that our agreement, meet it on the way up as it's meeting us on the way down.
Exactly, because if we get to a point where we sign something, vote for something as the authority or the board of supervisors or both bodies, that we support all these other documents, and that isn't in the main document, then we're left holding the bag with 1/4 of the county not furnished at all.
Yeah, and I asked the question, aren't we filling out the template?
Right.
In the exhibits? And the response I got after it ran back through the chain up through the state was, no, the state is doing that. And so we're waiting for the state.
And they had new people working on this too.
Well, at least Tamara Holmes has been a constant at DHCD in the broadband office.
Yeah.
But they said that difficulty in this agreement, the template, was because they had to incorporate ARPA rules because of the $700 million.
But they had a long time to do that as well.
I assume the deadline on the ARPA is also a part of this. They've got to get it done in the frame.
And there are some touches of that into this document that basically say December 31, 2026 is it. Any money that the regional commission is holding at that time would be returned to the counties. My question was, and what? And the project's over?
Yeah.
All points stops building and we stop reimbursing them?
Well, and that, I have a list, I just wanted to read through. And I apologize, Gary, your email didn't come through till late in the day, so some of this is probably redundant or ties into things you've already mentioned. Non-performance, which I think links back to your original discussion of having an additional party involved in kind of completing the loop there in terms of reporting. I guess my other concern is, as a board, we've accepted a lot of money to do this project, both from the Vegas Foundation and PATH. And if we don't, or if there are problems with this project along the way, what are the implications for the funds we have accepted? I didn't think that it was clearly enumerated, at least not clearly enough for my comfort level, that the money that's in the document that indicates the county will pay is not specified, that that's a cap and that it won't go any higher than that. I think that should be explicit also. There were additional service levels that Mr. Carr enumerated when he came and spoke to the board about the $59 service level. I believe he enumerated 59. And I know Mark and Margaret have these written out. I think you enumerated 59, 79, 99, and I think 119 was the highest service level. And the document failed to capture those different service levels. Yes.
And we have the presentation as well.
So I just think that should be captured in the document also. I had the same concerns about RDOF and the long drops. I have the consumer protections and service guarantee questions, which again, it sounds like you're looking at reporting. That would kind of cross the T's and dot the I's on some of that. But I don't think we have a good handle on that. And that at the beginning of a multi-year project, I think it's something that we should drill into. And I don't really care if the other 7 counties don't like it.
The communications plan that was shared, I didn't reattach it to this document, which is referenced within, seeks to identify the reporting cycle out to the regional commission and the counties. And on a quarterly basis, there would be an update on what progress there is on the 4 metrics. Those same metrics would be the metrics that are used with DHCD, through which all points can request payment that would be passed up and then passed back down, approved or not. So that reporting is probably more robust than a lot of areas. But some of the other questions I think align with many that others have. And why there's no price protection on those higher tiers. He said that the basic tier was fixed to inflation in the presentation, and then in the documents it says CPI. There's no, and he was very clear in his presentation, the others are not. They're not protected. So you could argue and say, well, you said it was going to be 75, but there's no restriction on increasing it. So the key is though affordable internet, and there is for $15 a month in the application VoIP services on top. So you could get $60 a month for internet, another $15, and you can have internet and phone, which is way more competitive than you can get from Comcast or DSL or whatever. But there's no protection on the $15 a month for VoIP. It's sold in the application, but it's not in the agreement.
Well, then the other thing that I hear from a lot of people, they want to know about this good faith agreement. And it's always my recollection that the good faith agreement lasts for the duration of our work with All Points Broadband. Is that correct?
It is until an agreement is executed with All Points. Well, I forget the wording. I don't have it in front of me, and there is specific word, but essentially, my understanding is whatever agreements get signed as part of this, that MOU is no longer of value and not enforced. And Ms. Panda can review that in more detail.
Madam Chair, that would be correct.
Thank you.
So we can't ask for an incorporate by reference.
Well, and I don't think it needs to be. It's a separate document.
Yeah, right.
I can't. Now, the wording does suggest that there would be an agreement with All Points, but there's not, right? Be nice if we could backdoor that into getting us a party to the All Points agreement, but good luck.
Madam Chair, to that last point, if I might, I do think that we might make a little headway on including participating counties as being third-party beneficiaries on the grant agreement with All Points. Kind of hard to deny that we're third-party beneficiaries, so.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah, but by them explicitly saying that we're not, I think that's deliberate. I mean, that's not an accident.
I know Mr. Carr has said he doesn't want to be beholden to 8 masters. And I understand that. That makes sense. So if the regional commission has to be our clearance house for grievances, and we can compel them to do that as a party to their agreement, that's great. Even better if we can somehow have legal entry into the other agreement. But I'll leave that to Ms. Pandek.
Well, but we as a county will be required to do those, what did they call them? Different events to help with the profile of the project.
According to the application, right, we're going
Yeah.
to participate in the outreach and all that.
Yeah, the media.
Media and outreach and coordinated effort and.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I mean, there are certainly expectations placed directly on the county. So I think that we are definitely a party to these things.
Well, and it's interesting, the documents say things like the counties have committed $62.45 million. In what legal form?
Right.
I guess the fiscal agent agreement. We've committed it to the regional commission, who's committed it to All Points and DHCD. But we've never committed it to All Points or DHCD.
So Ms. Donna, what comes next and what do we need to do?
Well, I think it is going to be very interesting to see what happens in the Fauquier board meeting. And we do have our regular scheduled meeting on Monday. So if there are anything that hasn't come out today that we want to share with Mr. Curry and Ms. Pandek to be prepared for Monday, this is just a way to have more time to make sure that everybody gets a chance to ask questions.
Some other localities apparently don't do special meetings. I know this body and your friends on the Board of Supervisors, if there's an important subject you're willing to have a special meeting, if I were you, I'd be the last to sign this and see what every other county, squeezes out through the mill. And you can be flexible enough to call a meeting whenever you need to call a meeting to do that.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion. And you'll have another review in a week. Maybe we'll have some more information based on conversations with Fauquier and back and forth with a few others to see if any of these, we can get any traction on any of these issues that we've talked about.
Yeah, I mean, we've raised a bunch of stuff, and I mean, I appreciate Ms. Pandek's really thorough summary of kind of the lay of the land, so to speak, and I understand that we're somewhat constrained, and we had to be competitive on the front end of the project, obviously, and so I think now we're getting a taste of potentially what we gave up in terms of local control by trying to compete more effectively through a regional group. Certainly that's somewhat expected, but it's still regrettable because, we have obvious responsibility as members of Board of Supervisors as well to do our part to protect our constituents' interests. So it's not a great feeling, and I agree with Mr. Frazier and Ms. Smith. I think everyone's raised really valid concerns, and it's not a great feeling to feel like a lot of what we're raising is falling on deaf ears, and that's not criticism at all of Ms. Pandek or Mr. Curry. It sounds like you've really been trying hard. It's just the reality of the fact that we're one of 8 is where we're feeling the pushback. But yeah, I do think Mr. Frazier has articulated something important to all of us, which is the RDOF area, making sure that that's certainly not dropped or forgotten, and then whether we can achieve greater specificity in terms of who's going to get coverage or how that's defined, and if that comes through a more blanket statement about everyone who is currently unserved, underserved, in whatever form that takes. I do think it's important because I agree, like at least the maps that we have seen in printed form are not satisfactory, so.
And the other body does meet on the 2nd. Wondering if we should go ahead and schedule a potential meeting. For like,
No joint meeting,
yeah,
not bad idea.
Just continue this one.
Well, this meeting will be, you'll have your regular meeting on the
Next one.
18th,
Right.
and
we can
then
continue that one.
continue that one to the 2nd.
I like that idea.
Or maybe you'll want to meet in between. I don't know. Maybe there'll be more sausage to mill, or maybe it'll be clear by then that you've kicked the can as many times as people will allow, and Lucy will pull it away or something.
Okay.
Any other thoughts?
Mixed your metaphors there, Gary. It took me a minute.
Whoa.
He kicks the can until Lucy kept pulling it away.
Footballs, cans.
Lucy pulls footballs.
Footballs,
Wait,
come on,
put
man.
5 cents in the can.
Gotta
It's like
keep you
Jack's
thinking.
advice.
Good catch, good catch.
Oh,
Man.
Then he went to sausage.
We cans, footballs, and sauce.
If anybody's listening, they won't know what we're
Very
talking about.
Americana.
I don't know. I tried to extend a metaphor about a rowboat in a bathtub the other night. That didn't
It
come
is
out
Monday.
right. Okay.
All right.
All right, I move that we adjourn, and thanks to all my colleagues for the great comments and input.
I'll second.
The motion is second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
6:43.
On the tennis.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Christine, you
I
are-
think it's the zoning, first of all, I want to say,